How's it going, guys and girls? Hope you guys are having a great week. So I'm back today with another What Do We Know So Far video. Now this one is actually on the new God of War. There's been a couple of videos released in the last 2 or 3 days. One was a cinematic trailer and another one was an actual really meaty gameplay footage which showed us a lot more of the combat and the gameplay, and it just got me super hyped for the game. The game looks so amazing, so beautiful, cannot wait for it. So I wanted to basically share it with you guys and talk about everything that we know so far about God of War. So let's get started. So this is developed by Santa Monica Studios, who did the previous God of War games. Now it's the 8th installment in the God of War series and is actually the 8th chronologically speaking, and is the sequel to 2010's God of War 3. It is set for release on April the 20th and will be available on the PlayStation 4 exclusively. It will also be available on the PlayStation Pro and will run at native 4K resolution. So this game looks absolutely amazing. It's actually one of my most anticipated games coming out this year. I cannot wait to play this game, and I will be doing a full Let's Play series of this game as well for you guys. So what do we know about it? Well, the setting is completely different. For those of you that might know or might not know, the previous installments were set exclusively in ancient Greece and really delved into sort of ancient Greek mythology, and we got to see a lot of the Greek gods, many of whom Kratos killed, including gods like Ares, Athena, Zeus, and so on. Well, God of War is actually set several years after the events of God of War 3, and it moves away from ancient Greek mythology and is instead going to delve into Norse mythology. The developers were actually torn between Egyptian mythology and Norse mythology, both of which were considered, and Corey Balrog, who's on board for directing the game, and he's well known for working on the previous games, particularly I think it was God of War 2 that he worked on exclusively, but he did say that there was kind of a 50-50 split in the development team, with a lot of people on board with sort of exploring ancient Egypt. But the reason that he decided to go with Norse mythology was simply that Egyptian mythology was just, there was too much civilization. So there would have been really big kind of populated areas, a lot of civilization. And he said basically that he wanted the game to feel more isolated. He wanted the land to feel more barren, and decided that the Norse setting would be much more ideal for allowing us to focus on purely on Kratos and his son. And the central theme of the game is kind of this whole theme of a stranger in a strange land, and Norse mythology just seemed to fit that theme very, very well. The game, if you want to know sort of historically where it sort of places, it actually predates the Vikings. So this is not set in the sort of the period of Vikings. So we're not going to see any kind of Viking sort of history or anything like that. And it is actually at a time where the Norse gods were walking the earth. So we can expect to see a lot of Norse gods. And I'm really hoping we're going to bump into like Odin and Thor. And I can't wait for that. I'm really, really interested in sort of delving into that. Of course, the enemies are going to be very relatable to the area that we're set in as well. So there are most of the enemies are things like trolls, ogres, draugs. We have seen some footage with a revenant, which looked just insane and look really, really, really cool. Players will be able to visit some of the 9 realms of Norse mythology. Kratos really knows nothing about Norse mythology. He's kind of like the player in this way, and that, you know, during the sort of progression in the game, you'll start to uncover a lot more about Norse mythology, about the gods and the setting, and sort of it'll kind of reveal itself as you play. So plot-wise, the game is set many years after the events of God of War 3. Just from the beard alone, we can tell that this is a much older, perhaps wiser, more seasoned Kratos. And Kratos now lives with his young son called Atreus. And it seems from some of the trailer footage that Atreus's mum possibly Kratos' wife or lover has died. And we have seen this kind of a little bit of sort of her body that was wrapped in cloth, and Atreus sort of praying to it. From that trailer, we get the impression that one of her requests when she died is that she wanted her ashes to be scattered across the peak of possibly a very sort of religiously important or mythologically important peak. And basically Atreus and Kratos set off on a quest to carry this out for her. Now, ultimately, Kratos' alternative quest is basically to teach his son how to survive in this incredibly harsh world, and also to try to sort of overcome and master his own rage that's always been with him, and there's always been a huge problem. You know, if you've played the previous games, Kratos is a character that just acts on an instinct, and his rage and his hate is very close to the surface. So it's going to be really interesting to see him try to sort of control this rage, and also learn to be not only a father but also a mentor to his son as well. So I'm really looking forward to that dynamic. You know, Corey Balrog has sort of said that this is a much more human Kratos, and that we're going to see a lot more sort of dynamic between him and Atreus. And we have seen, you know, some footage where you really see that Kratos is kind of awkward and doesn't really know how to relate to his son. So hopefully during the course of the game, we're going to see that relationship progress. You know, if we do look at it, it very much gives me a feeling of The Last of Us, and a feeling of Joel and Ellie, and how their relationship progressed. I'm hoping we'll get something that'll be as equally rewarding and just as moving, and I'm sure we will. You know, I've got really high expectations. Kratos also has to contend with a lot of the Norse gods, which are actually incredibly faithful for their own safety, their own life. Of course, they are aware of Kratos' history and the destruction and the death that he wrought on the Olympian gods, and they're very much fearing for their own life, their own safety, and are obviously trying to stop him or attack him or take him down. So not only will Kratos have to contend with that for his own life, but he's also going to have to protect his son as well, and teach him to be sort of self-sufficient and survive and that kind of thing. So I'm really looking forward to that and see how it plays out. During the course of the journey as well, from one of the trailers, we've discovered that Atreus doesn't really know much about his dad, that Kratos' past is sort of shrouded in mystery. He knows nothing about the fact that Kratos is a demigod, and that obviously his father was Zeus. So he knows nothing about his ancestry, where he comes from, and, you know, Kratos is kind of torn about revealing this information to him. So Atreus, during the course of the game, is obviously going to learn a lot about his father's complicated and very shady and very blood-soaked past, and also more about his own ancestry and what kind of, you know, young man he wants to become, whether he wants to become like his father or sort of come into his own right and be his own man, and whether or not that's going to ultimately result in him rejecting his father and possibly fighting him. Who knows? I'm really excited to see where this relationship goes and what they sort of do with it. Yeah, I'm super looking forward to it. I was a little bit concerned because in the previous God of War games, it's only been Kratos by himself alone. We've never had a companion character with him before, so this is very, very new. And I was a little concerned whether or not Atreus would be a likable character, whether or not he'd come across as a kind of an emo, teenage, angst-ridden boy. But from what I hear of people that have played some of the gameplay and have sort of engaged with Atreus and listened to him, that he's actually quite an engaging and quite likable character, and quite well fleshed out character as well. He's also very, very smart, and also very, very useful, because, you know, Kratos knows nothing about Norse mythology. He's a stranger in a strange land, but Atreus actually has grown up in that land, and his mother potentially could have been a Norse woman, and has taught him how to read and speak and sort of read the ancient runes in the world. So Atreus is kind of like Kratos's guide in this world, and he's very useful in terms of combat and exploration and puzzle solving and unlocking information and obviously sharing that information not only with Kratos but with the player as well. So in that way, he's quite a very smart, sort of self-sufficient young man. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to learning more about his character. Now, one of the biggest changes in God of War is the gameplay. There are so many changes in the new God of War. It looks so different, and I'm really excited by all these changes that we've seen. The first big change is the camera. The camera is now a third person over the shoulder free camera. This is incredibly different to previous installments where they used, very sort of fixed, third person fixed cinematic camera, which, depending on what was happening, could pan out quite far. Sometimes it could be an aerial view, sometimes it could zoom in on Kratos, behind Kratos, and it often depended on what was happening in the combat and what was happening at the time. And the whole idea is that, it very much felt like you were playing a movie, that you never missed the action, that you could always see it from the angle that the developer intended for you to see it from. Well, now this fixed over the shoulder camera is going to make us feel a lot closer to the action, a lot closer to Kratos. It's going to be probably a lot more gritty, and we're obviously going to be able to control the camera a little bit more freely to sort of look and explore this world, because I have to say, the environments in this game just look visually stunning. It looks like it's going to be on par with Uncharted 4 and Horizon Zero Dawn. Whether or not it'll surpass Horizon Zero Dawn, I don't know, but the game still looks really, really beautiful. So let's talk a little bit about the actual combat, because that's always been one of the biggest strengths in the God of War series, is just how fast, how fluid, and how much fun the combat is. So one of the biggest changes to the combat in the new God of War is that the weapon you're using is very, very different. The Blades of Chaos are gone. Obviously, you lost these at the end of God of War 3, and those very much did affect the kind of combat that you had. In the previous installments, it was much more about sort of building up your hits and your combos, and it felt very, very different. Well, the new weapon in God of War is a battle axe. It's actually called the Leviathan axe, and it just looks so weighty, so hefty, and just like a huge damage dealer. It can actually be infused with different elemental abilities. It can be used in your basic attack. There are light attacks and heavy attacks, which are mapped to the R1 and R2 button, which you can freely use between. You can also throw it at enemies as well and use it as a ranged weapon. If you have the ice ability on it and throw it at an enemy's head, it will actually freeze them in place, so you can sort of keep them out of the game. Or you can charge at them with your shield and shatter them. You could also, use it as a ranged weapon to sort of take out enemies that might be hitting you with a ranged attack. You can, you can also recall it to your hand, very much like Thor's hammer, and it will cause damage on its return to your hand as well. It will ricochet through objects. It will swing around to hit multiple targets depending on where the camera's facing, obviously, when you recall it. But I've got to say, the axe looks absolutely amazing. Now, of course, if you do throw the axe, it doesn't mean that you're completely left vulnerable. Nope. You can use hand-to-hand combat, obviously, as Kratos, and they wanted to really focus on this. And some of the hand-to-hand combat in this game just looks so brutal as you're pummeling into enemies, and you build up what's called a stun meter. And once that meter maxes out, you actually get a button prompt, which I think is R3. And that's where you can do this really sort of one-hit kill, amazingly powerful sort of finishing move. And, one of the things I was concerned about was whether or not Kratos has always felt like this overpowered, just muscle-bound powerhouse, and you've always believed that he could take on these huge monsters, and the Blades of Chaos were very much a part of that feeling. And I was really concerned whether or not he would feel like that with this new weapon, but it definitely looks like that is still the case, and that's really, really exciting to see. As well, you also have a shield. Now this is actually unfolds on your arm, and it's attached to your armor, and it can be used both offensively and defensively. So you can use it to pummel into opponents and stun them and knock them back. You can use it to parry. You can use it to block. You can use it to sort of jab. There's so many uses for the shield, and it just looks really, really cool. As well, of course, Kratos has Spartan Rage. That's a new thing that they've brought in, and that's obviously where your adrenaline and your rage meter builds up, and you press both L3 and R3 and unleash a rage meter, which means your hand-to-hand attacks do a lot more damage. So we've seen a lot of the combat, and the combat just looks so good. You know, it very much has essences of sort of the Dark Souls series, you know, this whole idea of rolling out of the way, attacking strategically, you know, using certain combos. Atreus as well, you can use him as well. He's mapped to a button, I think it's square, and you can actually he'll freely attack, and he'll freely pull people off of you, particularly weaker enemies, so that you don't get sort of overwhelmed, and give you a little bit of support. But you can also sort of aim at an enemy and actually give him an order to shoot at that enemy. And I think his arrows have a kind of like a stun effect, which you can use to your advantage as well. So the combat just looks absolutely amazing. What I loved as well is that the axe can also be used in a puzzle solving kind of manner. We saw Kratos sort of hitting objects and hitting levers and opening up pathways and that kind of thing to gain access to chests, or, you know, access to other areas on the map. So puzzle solving is back, and I'm really happy to see that. One of the new additions as well is there are more RPG elements. This can be seen in both leveling, upgrading your weapons, and also in crafting armor. Throughout the game, you collect what's called hack silver, and this can be used to buy upgrades or craft new armor sets. In terms of upgrading your actual axe and also your shield, there are two characters within the game which have been confirmed, which is Brock and Sino. These are known in Norse mythology most famously because they actually crafted and forged Thor's hammer, and somehow they end up helping you. I think one of them crafts your axe and the other one crafts your shield. And you actually collect runes which can be used to upgrade your axe and upgrade your shield, and these can be placed into slots on your axe. I think there are two slots, one for light attacks and one for heavy attacks as well. So we've never had crafting armor. We've had upgrading weapons in the game, but that was always sort of connected to your XP, and as you sort of gained XP and gained red orbs, you could use these to fill up an XP meter, and that would upgrade it. But we've not had this kind of crafting and this kind of upgrading where you could choose what you wanted to upgrade, you know, and there are multiple choices that we can see, from upgrading your attack ability or your defense ability, the speed with which your runes recharge or your rage meter fills, those kinds of things. So it does allow you to be a little bit more strategic in terms of what you choose to do. In terms of the size of the game, Corey Balrog has confirmed that the game will be roughly a 25 to 35 hour experience, which is absolutely massive when we compare it to the previous installments. So this game is going to be huge. Now, it's not an open world game, but Corey has said it is a more open game, and what he basically means by that is there will be a very linear story. There will be sort of linear paths to continue that story, but there are sort of branching off areas where you can explore as well, and you know, you'll be able to uncover like chests and treasure and sort of points of interest and sort of side quests and things like that. I think you said about 50% of the game are these kind of optional open areas where you can explore, and that's really interesting, and that's going to lend quite nicely to a lot of sort of replay value. So there's a lot of information there on the new God of War game, which just looks absolutely incredible. I cannot wait for this game. I haven't been this hyped in quite a while, and there was a lot of good games last year, and probably Horizon Zero Dawn was one of the ones I was most hyped about. Of course, Mass Effect Andromeda, but I am super hyped for God of War. I'm a huge fan of the franchise, and I cannot wait to get my hands on this game on the April 20th and play it, and I just think it's going to be an absolute blast. So yeah, there is everything that we know so far about God of War. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Have you played any of the previous games? Which was your favorite out of those previous installments, and what are you most looking forward to in the new God of War, which comes out next month? Anyway, I hope you guys found this video interesting and informative. If you did, please hit the like button as always to show your support. I will be back again with more videos later, guys. I am currently working on my Story So Far series on God of War, and I'm hoping to bring some of those videos out to you guys soon, particularly before God of War comes out on April 20th. But anyway, hope you guys are having a great week. Take care, and as always, happy gaming. Bye, guys.